Venezuela has reaffirmed the importance of promoting multilateralism during the UN conference on disarmament. Brazil has confirmed the first case of the Covid-19 virus in Latin America. The Syrian Army continues to advance in its offensive against terrorists in Idlib province, while Russia and Turkey began talks on the situation. This is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss and welcome to the show. We begin in Geneva, where Deputy Minister for Multilateral Affairs at the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry, Alexander Yanez, participating in the high-level segment of the UN conference on disarmament, stressed the importance of eliminating nuclear weapons.
Venezuela reaffirms the importance of promoting multilateralism as a fundamental principle for the negotiations over the issues of disarmament and non-proliferation. In that sense, we affirm the importance of the fourth extraordinary period of the session of the General Assembly of the United Nations dedicated to disarmament. This continues being the appropriate way to promote established priorities, including nuclear disarmament, as a maximum priority for the international community.
And on the sidelines of the ongoing 43rd session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arrieta met with the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Maura, to discuss cooperation agreements. And Foreign Minister Arrieta also met this Wednesday with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet. The meeting formed part of the agenda of the Venezuelan minister in the context of the 43rd session of the Human Rights Council. Arrieta ratified the willingness of the government of Venezuela to cooperate with all United Nations mechanisms in the framework of respect for international law. In late 2019, Venezuela rejected statements by Bachelet referring to the legitimate government of Nicolas Maduro as a regime and recognizing opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido, who declared himself president of the country despite enjoying no popular support or authority. And Arrieta also held a meeting with the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, Laura Thompson, to denounce the unilateral US sanctions imposed against Venezuela's state-run airline Conviasa. He warned Thompson that these measures intend to prevent the implementation of the Return to the Homeland plan promoted by the government of President Nicolas Maduro, which facilitates the return of Venezuelan migrants stranded in vulnerable conditions in other nations. President of Chile, Sebastián Piñera, announced a tax reform on Tuesday to collect $2.2 billion additional in revenue per year. The Chilean head of state said that the measure would generate additional revenue equivalent to 0.6% of gross domestic product. He claimed this would be used to finance a social agenda with emphasis on the protection of older adults. According to the Ministry of Finance, the measure will establish fairer treatment for this sector in terms of tax payments. Chile has been rocked by widespread protests for months against a social model that dates back to the Pinochet dictatorship and is promoted by the current government. And continuing in Chile, political parties and social organizations have launched their campaigns for the upcoming constituent process. The different campaigns seek to persuade the electorate to either approve or reject the drafting of a new constitution in a referendum scheduled for April 26. According to the electoral rules, campaigns can run from February 26 to March 28, using posters, signs, TV ads, printed and electronic media, radio stations, as well as deploying activists on the ground. The current Chilean constitution dates from the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. And our correspondent in Chile, Viola Dragnet, brings us details on the ongoing protests at the Viña del Mar International Music Festival.
Protests outside La Quinta Vergara, the historic venue of Viña del Mar Festival, are still going strong. This, despite the strong police presence and control around this venue. The truth is that protests have definitely reached Quinta Vergara, and the festival already described as unique because artists, one way or the other, have echoed the social demands and showed support for the street protests that started on October 18th. Even during opening night, singer Ricky Martin called upon the youth to continue with their demands, and then Mon Laferte's performance and interactions with the public brought to light what organizers have been trying to hide all along. She echoed the chants of the public gathered at Viña del Mar against President Sebastián Piñera and police repression.
finalmente destapa lo que había tratado de ocultarse de una manera u otra.
Mon Laferte is an internationally acclaimed Chilean singer who is embroiled in lawsuit and threats by the local police because of her accusations questioning their involvement in subway torchings. Viña del Mar Festival will wrap up on Friday, but it has been a milestone because never before has this event had such a deep political connotation. Meanwhile, protests continue outside Quinta Vergara and another demonstration is being organized to take place in Chile's 5th region.
The Central Electoral Board of the Dominican Republic announced the printing of ballots for the 140 municipalities and their districts in which manual voting was suspended during the municipal elections on February 16th. According to the board, around 2,800,000 ballots are being printed. At a press conference, the board reported that the printing of ballots for the 18 municipalities using the automated voting system during the previous process will begin this Wednesday. The ballots were validated on Monday by accredited delegates of political parties. The rescheduled municipal elections will be held on March 15th. And the protests against the suspension of the elections in the Dominican Republic on February 16th continue. Our correspondent Daisy Toussaint brings us further details in the following report.
Hello, and a pleasure talking to you. That's right, today marks the 11th consecutive day of protest in front of the Central Electoral Board since municipal elections were called off on the 16th of February. Ever since, the protesters have been demanding clarification on what happened in the botched elections and respect for democracy. On the 25th of February, we watched several critical videos on social media, which were then broadcast by mainstream media, where the police prevented youth dressed in black and carrying posters from walking near the President Danilo Medina's official residence. On the 27th of February, Day of National Independence, a number of personalities, including artists, are organizing a protest action dubbed El Trabucazo 2020 in front of the Central Electoral Board, in reference to the events in 1844 that led to the country's independence and the birth of the Republic. Organizers aim at gathering at least 1 million people. The Central Electoral Board has already printed the ballots for the 140 municipalities where the elections will be rerun under the manual vote modality. The ballots for the 18 municipalities where electronic vote was scheduled before will be printed today. All municipalities will conduct manual voting this time around. And this is all the information I have for you now. Back to you in the studios.
And turning to Guyana now, after much criticism and following a meeting with opposition leader Mubarak and the team from the People's Progressive Party, the Guyana Elections Commission has backtracked on its decision to reduce the number of polling stations in the upcoming general elections. Chairman of the Commission, Justice Claudette Singh, has made it clear that the decision not to use private residences as polling stations remains in place, but the Chief Elections Officer, Keith Lowenfield, is set to address complaints regarding the public facilities to be used. A Commonwealth Observer Group led by the former Prime Minister of Barbados, Owen Arthur, is already in Guyana to observe the preparations for the upcoming general and regional elections. In Mexico, parents of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa student teachers marched this Wednesday in downtown Mexico City to mark 65 months since their disappearance. The march calling for answers and justice has become a monthly event, bringing together the families, other student teachers and social organisations. The missing students' relatives are awaiting a meeting with government representatives on March 5th. And coming up, Brazil has confirmed its first case of Covid-19. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. The first case of the new coronavirus in Latin America was confirmed by the Brazilian authorities on Wednesday. The patient is a 61-year-old Brazilian man who recently travelled to Italy and is in a stable condition but remains in isolation at his home in Sao Paulo. The diagnosis was announced by Health Minister Luis Henrique Mandetta, who stressed that the Brazilian man spent 2 weeks in northern Italy's Lombardy region on a work trip where he contracted the virus. Mandetta also added that the South American nation is investigating 20 additional suspected cases, including 12 patients who recently returned from Italy. And China reported 52 new Covid-19 deaths on Wednesday, the lowest figure in more than 3 weeks, bringing the death toll to 2,715. Fears over the coronavirus have begun to spark concern regarding the country's hosting of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. However, authorities have assured that the preparations are advancing according to schedule.
According to the schedule, there are 20 Beijing test events, including the first event in February. All the other events will be held in the 2020-2021 competition season. The cancellation of that event was due to the epidemic and to protect the health of athletes and referees. The following test events we have should not be affected, and preparations for them are underway according to schedule.
The French Health Ministry announced that a 60-year-old man has become the first French victim of the Covid-19 virus. The man died on Tuesday night after being rushed to a Paris hospital in a serious condition.
Regarding the 3 new cases we had last night, there is a 55-year-old French man who is currently hospitalized in Amiens and who is in serious clinical situation. He is currently in intensive care. The investigation in the case is ongoing. The 16th case is a 36-year-old French man currently hospitalized in Strasbourg. He was just returned from Lombardy. He shows no signs of seriousness, and the regional health authority there also has contact details for all the people who he's been in contact with. The 17th confirmed case is a 60-year-old Frenchman who was urgently tested yesterday at the Salpêtrière hospital in a very serious condition and who unfortunately died during the night. An investigation into the circumstances have been launched as a matter of urgency.
And the novel coronavirus has now infected more than 80,000 people around the world. Algerian authorities announced the country's first case of the virus as an Italian citizen who arrived in the country on February 17th. Meanwhile, in Italy, the total number infected with Covid-19 stands at 374, while there have been 12 deaths and 1 person has been given the all clear. The total number of confirmed cases in Iran is now 95, where 16 people have died and 39 have recovered and been discharged from hospitals. Meanwhile, Switzerland, Croatia and Austria reported their first cases of the coronavirus on Tuesday. Over 600,000 South Koreans have signed an online petition calling for the impeachment of President Moon Jae-in over the government's mishandling of the Covid-19 outbreak. The petition appeared on the website of the presidential office on February 4th. Any petition that gets more than 200,000 signatures in less than a month must receive an official response. The petitioner argued that the government refused to ban Chinese citizens from entering Korea and also criticised President Moon's decision to provide 3 million masks to China, while he failed to come up with any measures to deal with the spike in mask prices and the shortage of these supplies in the country itself. A Russian delegation will visit Turkey on Wednesday to discuss the situation in Idlib, an embattled province of northwestern Syria. Russia's foreign ministry said it expected positive results from the talks with Turkey. Turkish and Russian officials held 2 rounds of talks in Ankara and Moscow in the past few weeks, but negotiations have not yet yielded any results. Tensions have been running high amid the offensive by Syrian government forces in Idlib and parts of Aleppo province, the last remaining terrorist-held areas in the country. On Wednesday, Syrian forces liberated 7 new towns. And our correspondent Hisham Wanas brings us more details on the situation in Syria.
Greetings, friends. The Arab army continues to advance against terrorist groups in the south countryside of the northwestern province of Idlib, the last extremist stronghold in Syria. In the past 2 days, Syrian troops have liberated more than 15 towns and villages, including the strategic city of Khabar Nabil. Immediately afterwards, the Syrian troops began operations to comb and clear mines from the liberated areas and establish control points to continue their advance against the terrorist groups, noting that the extremists suffered heavy casualties in the clashes and Syrian troops seized their military equipment and munitions. Likewise, They assured that the terrorists are almost cornered in small areas of Idlib, and the Arab army will soon be able to announce that Idlib is a territory free of terrorists, despite Turkey's threats to attract Syrian Arab army troops if they don't Syrian Arab troops if they don't stop this anti-terrorist offensive. But we will continue to follow developments.
And turning to Palestine now, 56 Palestinians, including 2 journalists, were injured after Israeli forces used live ammunition and rubber bullets to disperse a protest against US President Donald Trump's so-called Middle East peace plan. The protesters had taken to the streets for a peaceful demonstration in Tayassir village in the occupied West Bank when Israeli soldiers arrived and violently repressed them. The Red Crescent confirmed it had treated and evacuated dozens of people to a nearby hospital.
We are continuing with the national campaign to support the Jordan Valley and fight the deal of the century. The decision was to go to Bardala and Kaun to cultivate olives, but the occupation prevented us from going to that region. This is our land, and we will exercise our natural right on this land by cultivating our land and building our schools. We are protesting in order to prove to the Zionists that we will not waste a single grain of our soil from our land, especially the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley is valued the same as Jerusalem, which is the eternal capital of Palestine.
And after this last break, we have more on developments in Africa. Don't go away. Welcome back. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has come under fire for not yet visiting flooded areas of the UK weeks after the waters rose. Meanwhile, opposition Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has visited flood victims in several parts of the country. Egypt saw a military funeral in Cairo on Wednesday for former President Hosni Mubarak, who ruled for 30 years until he was ousted in 2011 in a popular uprising. Mubarak died on Tuesday, weeks after undergoing surgery at the age of 91. The former president served as Egypt's 4th president from 1981 until his removal in what became known as the Arab Spring. Our correspondent Dianette Cruz brings us more details on the funeral rites in Cairo.
Who passed away in a hospital of this capital yesterday at the age of 91. The ceremony was held in the El Moshir Tantawi Mosque and saw the participation of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, alongside other high-ranking government officials and military leaders, as well as Mubarak's children and his supporters. The funeral rites included a military parade, and the coffin covered with an Egyptian flag was transported by a horse-drawn carriage, while the honor guard fired several shots. Finally, his remains will lie in rest in the cemetery of Cairo's Heliopolis district. Hosni Mubarak was overthrown in 2011 during the popular movement known as the Arab Spring, but he received such significant funeral rights due to a 1975 law that honors commanders that participated in the Great October War of 1973 against Israel, during which Mubarak was an Air Force chief. From today, there will be 3 days of national mourning, as decreed by the Egyptian government. This is all we have for now. Back to you in the studio.
A summit of Central African states heard appeals to step up the fight against jihadists, whose offensive across 3 countries has claimed thousands of lives and inflicted crippling economic damage. Mauritania's president and summit host Mohamed Ghazouani warned that the conflict in Libya poses a threat to the security and development of the entire Sahel region. He added that the instability in Libya has created a fertile ground for illicit activities such as the trafficking of arms, people and drugs. The Sahel region, which comprises Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Mauritania and Chad, is battling an onslaught by armed groups that have killed more than 10,000 people since 2016.
Despite several international initiatives, the Libyan crisis continues to deepen and become more complex. Unfortunately, it continues to fuel and strengthen the activities of terrorist groups in the Sahel through the illicit trafficking of arms, munitions, drugs and human beings.
A French Beninese political activist who set fire to a banknote in an anti-colonial protest has been expelled from Senegal, his lawyer said on Tuesday. In August 2017, Kemi Seba set fire to a 5,000 CFA franc note worth about $8 as part of a protest against Franc-Afrique, the term for France's post-colonial meddling in Africa. Seba, whose real name is Stelio Capo-Chichi, is a writer, activist, Pan-Africanist, political leader and geopolitical analyst who features on several West African television stations and offers lectures in many African universities. In January 2018, he was elected as 2017 African Personality of the Year by African News for his fight against French neocolonialism and the CFA franc in Africa. Seba was ordered to leave Senegal after his trial, while the government declared him a serious threat to public order and cited his disparaging remarks aimed at African leaders. The move sparked condemnation from human rights groups. South African trade unions and social movements held a march to Parliament ahead of the 2020 budget announcement by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni. Unions are unhappy with the austerity measures that Mboweni was expected to unveil on Wednesday, including an increase in value-added tax, a wage freeze for all public service workers, and retrenchment of thousands from state-owned enterprises. Mboweni says these measures are necessary to revive the ailing economy, but unions argue that the measures will hurt the poor. And we conclude in India, where the death toll in the worst religious violence seen in decades in New Delhi has risen to 23, as Indian police have been accused of looking the other way while Muslims and their properties are targeted by Hindu fundamentalists. The clashes first broke out on Sunday between those who are for and against the Citizenship Amendment Act passed last year that offers Indian citizenship to religious minority migrants but excludes Muslims. The protest came in the context of the visit to India by US President Donald Trump. Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted on Wednesday appealing for peace 3 days after the violence broke out. He added that he had reviewed the situation and police were working to restore calm. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.